How has F1 testing evolved? Well, it's a completely different beast to what it used to be, that's for sure. As of 2007, testing time has become less and less frequent in an attempt to reduce running costs, which in turn helps the lower teams. It's gone from unlimited, all-you-can-eat, drive-to-your-heart's content testing to now having only 8 days before the season kicks off, which is absolute chaos for F1 teams. You heard me right, 8 days to test everything they have been developing over the winter. I struggled to tidy my bedroom in that time. In the early days of the sport, F1 teams would test their cars wherever they could, such as local racetracks, or if they were feeling cheeky and had a healthy relationship with the local law enforcement, maybe just a quick blast along the road or around an industrial estate. It was pretty much a case of Dave and the squad popping out with a pen and paper, writing down the odd notes and making sure stuff worked. 1972 was the year when Ferrari changed the game. Dave and the squad really had to get their thinking caps on as Ferrari built its own test track in Fiorano, which still exists to this day. It was a huge advantage as the team could simply use it whenever they wanted instead of relying on other tracks to shake down and test the cars. Oddly, however, even with these incredible testing facilities, Ferrari wasn't having much success at the time. When Niki Lauda rocked up at the team in 1974 and saw what Ferrari had going on, his first impression was, why don't they win all the races? Ferrari, of course, eventually got it right. In the late 90s, early 2000s, Michael Schumacher, with the help of dedicated Ferrari test drivers such as Luca Badoer and Luciano Berti, used to do thousands of kilometers of F1 testing during the season. In fact, there are even stories of Schumacher flying to Fiorano during race weekends, testing until it got dark, and then flying straight back to wherever the race was just to gain a bit more understanding, an advantage that no other team had. Speaking of using aviation, as learned from Mark Priestley's book The Mechanic, McLaren hired out the Santa Pod Raceway drag strip in the early 2000s to test a huge upgrade that they had designed. All the signs pointed to a huge performance advantage, but they needed to test it in real life, in the dry. Of course, the heavens opened and the whole team were left frustrated until one engineer, potentially jokingly, said to use a helicopter to dry the track by flying so low that the blades would disperse the water. The helicopter was arranged, it didn't work, but these are the lengths that F1 teams will go to test their car. Unsurprisingly, the consequence of unlimited testing is that it costs an enormous amount. To combat this, in 2007 track testing was reduced to 30,000 kilometers a year, and teams were only allowed to use one car at a time instead of 2 or sometimes even 3. A year later, that was halved to 15,000 kilometers, and in-season and private testing was banned altogether. The restrictions got tighter and tighter, and laws were even imposed on the teams being able to use their wind tunnels and CFD, which stands for Computation Fluid Dynamics. With a wind tunnel, experiments are carried out by blowing wind over a real-life object, who would have guessed, in a controlled environment and measuring the aerodynamic forces that arise. Compare this to CFD, it's the exact same experiment but carried out in computer simulation. With less and less time on track, millions of pounds of investment were transferred over to developing wind tunnels, testing facilities, car simulation and so on. The data F1 teams are able to extract from any given test session in this present day, for both simulation and on track, are leaps and bounds ahead of what they used to be able to learn. Dave and the squad would be gobsmacked at what information teams are able to acquire these days. They need to as well. In-season tests have returned, but with the caveat that teams have to put young drivers with minimal F1 experience in the car for at least 2 of the 4 allocated days. That also means teams are only allowed 8 days of pre-season testing, making it crucial that every single second counts, which is why it spelt disaster for McLaren Honda in 2017 when they were breaking down constantly during testing, covering only 1,978 kilometers before the first race of the season in Australia. Comparing that to Mercedes, who managed to cover 5,102 kilometers, you could say that wasn't the best preparation. What is the future of F1 testing? Will it be restricted even further in the future? Let us know in the comments section below.